Welcome to Talk Edge, the channel that helps you improve your English listening every day through short stories. Please note, these stories are completely fictional and created solely to support your listening practice. Whether you're working or still in school, if your goal is simply to sharpen your listening skills, join us on this journey to mastering English. And now, let's get started.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've all been there, right? You have something you really want. Maybe it's learning a new skill, finishing a big project, hitting a fitness goal, but that internal drive, that oomph, it just feels missing.
Yeah, it's like your motivation thermostat is set way too low.
Exactly. Or, on the flip side, maybe you did hit that big goal, you felt amazing for a moment, and then you felt that weird deflated crash.
That crash. Motivation often feels like this unpredictable, almost magical force we either have or we don't.
And it can be incredibly frustrating, like your brain is actively working against your ambitions.
So what if it's less about magic and more about understanding the fundamental machinery, the stuff operating in your mind?
Precisely. That's what this deep dive is all about. We're looking at some really eye-opening insights from a neuroscientist, someone who dives deep into the actual biological basis of our energy and drive.
Okay.
Focusing specifically on how the brain generates the capacity to pursue goals, not just, achieve them.
So the pursuit part.
Yeah, and we're talking about dopamine, but probably not in the super simplified way you might have heard before.
Right. The common understanding is often just like dopamine equals pleasure, the reward you get after you do something good. But this source material sounds like it presents a far more dynamic and maybe more useful picture.
I think so, yeah. So our mission today is to explore these excerpts together, uncover some maybe surprising facts about how your brain's core motivation system actually works.
Okay.
And hopefully give you a clearer sense of how to better operate your own mind and body to keep that forward momentum going.
Sounds good. Let's jump in.
All right. So the central figures in this whole discussion are dopamine, which is a key chemical messenger in your brain.
Right.
And its very close relative, epinephrine. Now, you probably know epinephrine better by its more common name.
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline, exactly.
Adrenaline. So wait, are you saying that feeling of alertness, maybe even mild jitters, the kind you get when you're keyed up for something?
Yeah.
That's linked to dopamine?
Absolutely. And what's particularly fascinating and a key point from the source is that dopamine is the molecule from which epinephrine is actually made.
Wow. Okay. Made from dopamine.
Yeah, they're chemical cousins, part of the same system, working in concert. They aren't just loosely related. There's a direct biochemical pathway.
Okay, so dopamine is the precursor to adrenaline. How do they function together then in this context of motivation and pursuit?
Well, the source describes their joint function as driving this fundamental biological cycle. Crave, work, crave, work.
Crave, work, crave, work.
Yeah. And the critical point isn't just getting the reward. It's about fueling the persistent drive towards the reward.
And this is where the really surprising insight comes in, isn't it? The part that challenges that common idea that dopamine's only released when you, cross the finish line or finally get the prize.
Right. The core revelation really is that dopamine is released primarily during the pursuit itself.
During it, okay.
Not just when you reach the destination, but when you perceive you are heading in the right direction, when possibility opens up.
Huh.
The source uses these fantastic examples. Imagine a grazing animal searching for water in a barren landscape.
Okay.
Does it get the big dopamine hit only when it finally drinks? No.
Yeah.
The primary release happens when it gets a scent of water, when it perceives that a necessary resource might be available somewhere out there.
That initial scent, that perception of potential, that's what triggers the dopamine.
Yes. And that dopamine release gives the animal the energy and the drive to actually go find the water.
Right. It's not like it suddenly gets faster or physically stronger in terms of new muscle energy.
No, exactly. It's the brain providing the motivational fuel for the chase.
Or think of that even starker example from the source. You're walking in the desert, severely dehydrated, dying of thirst. You can barely put one foot in front of the other.
Right. Terrible situation.
Then you spot a lake a mile away. Suddenly you get this surge of energy, enough to run that last mile, even though moments before you were collapsing. Well, the source asks, how can that be? It's not like your body suddenly generated new physical resources like glycogen or ketones in that instant.
No, of course not.
It's the massive dopamine release triggered by spotting that potential survival reward and the sudden certainty that you're now heading directly towards it.
Wow. So the energy for that last mile isn't from stored sugar, it's chemically driven by the anticipation and the perceived closeness of the reward. That's a major reframe.
It really is. And this system doesn't just provide physical drive, it literally changes your perception.
How so?
That dopamine surge during pursuit makes you view the outside world as having more possibility. You're more likely to notice other potential resources or opportunities when you're in that forward-seeking state.
Okay, but if it's triggered by something external, like spotting a lake or smelling water, is it always tied to outside cues or?
Well, this is where it gets even more complex and highly personal. The source makes it clear that dopamine release is extremely subjective.
Subjective.
Meaning there is no single experience or sight that guarantees the same dopamine response in everyone.
So my individual interpretation, my internal state, my specific goals, that's what truly shapes this release.
Precisely. Your subjective view of the world and your belief system play a huge role. The source talks about the power of honest, positive thinking here.
Honest, positive thinking. What does that mean exactly? Not just wishful thinking?
No, not delusional thinking, like believing you're going to win the Olympics tomorrow when you haven't trained.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
But getting a genuine subjective boost from believing in your training, in your process, in the fact that you are putting in the work and heading in the right direction.
So believing in the integrity of your effort, in the value of the process itself, that can actually trigger this motivational chemistry.
Yes, and this is incredibly powerful for sustaining long-term effort. Think about it. If you can condition yourself to get that subjective dopamine lift from the process of working hard, from the belief that you are moving correctly towards your goal, you'll have significantly more energy to stay in that effort. You're fueled by the journey, not just the distant destination.
That feels really actionable. It's not just about having a big dream, but about finding ways to feel rewarded and energized by the actual steps you're taking right now.
Exactly. And this connects directly to the strategy of, leveraging effort and breaking down goals.
Making things smaller, more manageable.
Yeah, moving that mental horizon closer by setting smaller milestones, focusing on building consistent habits. The source emphasizes that completing something small releases dopamine.
Something small. Yeah.
It's the fundamental fact of completion and perceiving forward movement that matters, often more than the magnitude of the achievement in isolation.
So every time you check something off your to-do list, even something minor, you're literally giving your brain a little chemical high five, something that reinforces the work part of the cycle.
Essentially, yes. You need those consistent, smaller dopamine hits throughout your days, weeks, and months to maintain the energy and drive for the larger pursuit.
Yeah.
They keep the crave work engine turning over.
All right, so you're craving, you're working, getting those little boosts from progress, and then you hit the big one, the finish line, you achieve the major goal. What's the neuroscience of that moment?
That's typically where you get the biggest dopamine peak. It's the culmination, the perceived ultimate reward.
Feels great, presumably.
Oh yeah, it feels fantastic. But the source notes that this intense peak can often be followed by a significant crash afterward.
Ah, the post-goal blues, that feeling we mentioned at the start.
Exactly. It's not necessarily clinical depression, but that feeling of letdown, decreased motivation, the what now sensation.
So how do you navigate that? How do you handle the crash?
The key insight here, according to the source, is about managing your internal response to that peak.
Internal response.
Yeah, adjusting how you celebrate internally after a win.
Internally. Does that mean you shouldn't celebrate at all? Like no party?
No, you can certainly have external celebrations. That's fine.
Yeah.
But it's about your internal state, trying not to let the subjective feeling get manic or excessively saturated.
Okay.
If you can manage that internal peak, if you don't let yourself get completely overwhelmed by that single moment's reward, it can help mitigate the severity of the subsequent crash.
Ah, I see.
And it allows your system to reset more naturally over a few days.
So instead of immediately chasing the next big external thing to try and spike dopamine again,
Yeah,
you just kind of let this system recalibrate.
right. Recognize that a dip is likely coming. Understand it's just the system resetting after a major peak, and allow yourself that period without chasing external stimulation to pull yourself back up.
That makes sense. Letting it settle.
And this brings us to one of the most powerful concepts from the source, I think.
Sure.
One that ties everything together.
Okay.
It's the idea that your capacity to tap into dopamine as a motivator, as the fuel for seeking and pursuit, is essentially infinite.
Infinite.
Unlike the finite nature of external rewards.
Infinite capacity for seeking. That's a big idea.
It is. The source states it directly and beautifully. Seeking is the reward.
Seeking is the reward. Wow. That completely flips the conventional script, doesn't it?
Totally.
We're always taught the reward is getting the thing, the
Yes.
achievement.
Exactly. The common mistake is fixating only on the finish line as the source of the reward. The goal is still absolutely to reach the finish line and achieve the goal. Don't get me wrong. But the advice is to get to the end zone, step into it, acknowledge the win, but then do no end zone dance.
No end zone dance.
Meaning be ready to move on to the next pursuit, to the next seeking behavior, because that is the true infinite wellspring of motivation.
So you leverage the win, acknowledge it, but then immediately fold that energy back into the process of finding the next thing to seek, the next problem to solve.
Precisely. But crucially, without burning out. This isn't about being a relentless machine.
Right. That sounds exhausting.
It would be. This is where finding your personal sweet spot comes in. You can't be all gas pedal all the time.
Okay.
You need to balance that intense pursuit with moments of genuine self-reward that aren't tied solely to external outcomes, and importantly, with rest.
How do you figure out that balance for yourself, though? It sounds tricky.
Well, the source emphasizes that this sweet spot is personal and subjective. There's no universal formula.
So you have to experiment.
Yeah, you have to experiment and figure out what combination of pursuit, acknowledgement, self-reward, and rest allows you to maintain forward momentum consistently without crashing or burning out.
And, as we discussed, that involves prioritizing self-reward, finding internal ways to feel good about the process and your effort, rather than relying solely on external validation, which I guess makes your motivation system dependent on things outside your control.
Exactly. You lose control of your own dopamine system that way. That self-reward piece really connects back to the subjective dopamine release we talked about earlier, finding ways to internally celebrate or reinforce the process itself.
Yeah, it all seems to link up.
It absolutely does. And the final, maybe the most highly actionable instruction from the source is this. When you do achieve that big win and you feel that powerful saturating dopamine peak, allow yourself to truly bask in it for a moment. Fully appreciate what you've done, but then consciously and deliberately attach that feeling of accomplishment, that power you feel from the win, back to the effort process that got you there.
Oh, okay. So you don't just celebrate the result in isolation.
Yeah.
You link that feeling of success back to the specific steps, the training, the habits, the perseverance that led to it.
Yes. You condition your brain to associate the powerful feeling of the win with the journey that created it. That reinforces the pursuit mechanism itself, making the effort, the seeking, inherently feel more rewarding. And it sets you up for the next cycle of growth and accomplishment.
So to kind of distill this whole deep dive then, motivation isn't some fixed personality trait you either possess or lack.
Right. It's not fixed.
It's about actively engaging with your brain's core machinery. It's understanding that dopamine isn't just about the final prize, but is the fuel for the pursuit, for the seeking, and for the subjective belief that you are heading in the right direction. It's about leveraging effort, finding reward in small steps, navigating the peaks and valleys,
Yeah.
and ultimately recognizing that the infinite source of energy lies in the seeking itself, not just the fleeting moments of external achievement.
And that infinite capacity is already within you,
Yeah.
not waiting to be tapped into by just reorienting your focus.
So here's something to think about then. Considering that seeking itself is presented as the ultimate reward, and that your brain's incredible motivation system is fundamentally fueled by the pursuit and your own subjective belief in heading in the right direction. How can you consciously shift your focus today? Away from solely fixating on a distant destination towards maybe appreciating and reinforcing the journey itself. What small step can you take right now today to give yourself that subjective sense of positive momentum and fuel the system?
Thanks for sticking with us and listening to the end of today's Talk Edge episode. Don't worry if you didn't understand everything or only caught a little. I truly believe that with consistent practice, your listening skills will improve a lot. So keep going. You've got this. If you found today's content helpful, don't forget to follow and share it with your friends who are also learning English. That's all for now. See you in the next episode. Keep listening. Keep learning.